So we're talking a little bit in the kitchen on break here, and we found a topic that we might want to talk about for a couple minutes. So I said, well, we'll sit down while Lisa's getting some groceries before the bonfire tonight, and we'll discuss. So you had brought up the synchronicity of the passport in the Matrix, 9/11, 2001. And
as the expiration
and
date
how do
of
things
Neo's
like that,
passport.
right? So it's a contradiction. This thing, is it's a meaningful date, and I realized that the passport had to have a date on it and all these sorts of decisions. Right. But the question I asked myself when I noticed things like that, I said, that seems like if it is a foreshadowing type of event that's put in a piece of media before a big event that might
purposely.
Purposely. And there's a history of Operation Gladio where, our tax dollars have funded all sorts of terrorism around the world as Americans. That's part of our unknown history. Mm-hmm. So I asked the question, is there any trend or history or pattern of history in the film industry of these types of intellectual, psychological warfare, officers working in the film industry? And I would happen to be, let's see, when was it? It was like this January 2014. So earlier this year, I happened to catch, I was flipping through because I use the television in a positive way, not a negative way. I don't let it, your camera just died. No, I got more. I use it in a positive way insofar as I don't make myself a slave to its programming. I see what's available, say what would be enlightening, what could I learn from, either from a production and film sense or a historical sense, because those are my two main interests, is discovering history, meaningful parts of history that we don't know about, and making media about them. So I use the television in a positive way, and I saw on BBC they had a program, a mini series called Fleming, the Man Who Would Be Bond. And I thought, that might be interesting. I'm going to watch that.
I bet it was interesting.
Okay, so the first episode, basically Ian Fleming. Now, there's a lot of things that I've discovered about him that are not shown in there. So, for instance, his grandfather was Robert Fleming, who made Robert Fleming and Company. Maybe it was his great-grandfather. This is how the Fleming family became billionaires as ranked by Forbes, dynasties. So they're on the same page because to digress for just a moment, I was reading a book by John Loftus, The Secret War Against the Jews. And in there, I think maybe on page 82 at the top paragraph, he says that the Rothschilds, while they had power in the past, have no relevance or power today because they're not even listed in the Forbes 500 or Fortune, whatever the list was. And I was like, that's interesting. I got 30 books over there on the history of that family, and they're still very active. So I said, let me see if what he said is true. And I actually went and searched. And sure enough, they're not in the list of individuals, because that's what everyone's, who's the richest guy. Those are individuals. They're in the family dynasty section. So the Rothschilds are on this one page, and I have it linked here in the brain, and I could show you, but I would digress even further. Mm-hmm. And then I found also on that list was Robert Fleming and Company. The Fleming family had just sold their bank to Chase Manhattan a couple years ago, and they got like $8 billion for it. So Ian Fleming's whole family, his brother, his father, that's why he was an investment banker and then went into intelligence and these sorts of things. And so I asked the question, who did his family finance? What did they do? They were very close to a company called Jardine Matheson, which was one of the biggest opium procurement and sales firms for the British East India Company. Right. And now they merged with them, and they called it Jardine Fleming at one point, like in the 70s, right? So I was like, wow, that's a close relationship. They also funded the Harrimans, railroad tycoons, later, Nazi financiers and Soviet financiers, this sort of thing. So the whole, right. So you get into the skull and bones aspects of what they actually do as far as creating the Soviet bloc and the Cold War and all these different theatrical events that led up to something like 9/11, which takes us back to the passport and the Matrix. Right. So when I dug into Ian Fleming, I have this on screen capture, so I'll be able to show the audience. Right. We've got Ian Fleming here in the middle, and then you've got people above him that I found through research that, so were some of his bosses. So like Ian Fleming trained at Camp X. Well, what's that? Well, that's part of the British Security Coordination in Rockefeller Center, which is the part where the special relationship takes place in World War II to convince us to be in the war and this sort of thing. Right. So it's being run out of Rockefeller Center. Camp X is where they train assassins, and they give you specifically a test called the K test, the kill test. So Ian Fleming, in real life, had to go into a room and assassinate somebody in cold blood as the test to be put out in the field as a servant or an operative or whatever. And he failed the test, and, he didn't have the conscience to, do that. Right. So they put him at a desk. So he's running psychological operations and what came to be known as commandos, because this group also developed commandos, and then provided that that technology, if you will, to the Nazis, and then we hired those Nazis back, and that's where our special forces come from. So these are all highly fascinating pieces of American history that I was learning while I was watching this story about this guy who made these movies that everybody's seen, and we all root for James Bond, and when he gets to America and he's operating here, no one ever minds that he's spying in America and carrying out ops, and Felix Leiter from the CIA will always be there to kind of wipe up and help him out when he falls down and brush him off. So really, what you see in the long, after I read a whole bunch of books and months and research, the summary is that the James Bond series is a highly refined psychological warfare operation to ameliorate the American public to, the British Commonwealth, they decided to call it, because Empire was a bad.
Right.
So anyway, there's this whole story through the 20th century. There's a quote by Christopher Hitchens, he was an Oxford author, and he wrote a book called Blood, Class, and Nostalgia, Anglo-American Ironies. And in that book, there's a paragraph, and it says, for the greater part of the first half of the 20th century, British intelligence was primarily focused on engaging America in both of those wars on the side of Britain.
Right.
I think that says a lot, because they had already, they had not discovered or infiltrated. They created the Nazi intelligence system. So they were controlling Nazi spies, then using those double and triple agents. This is known as the double cross system. And we have artifacts about this. The guy who ran it, J.C. Masterman, John Cecil Masterman, wrote a book called The Double Cross System that's available on Amazon. I've got several copies of it. And what he does is lay out this plan of how to create all these layers of espionage so that if they ever needed to do it in the future, then, here's the report on how to create these agents, how to hide them, etc.
Mm-hmm.
The funny part is, I guess the ironic part, because it's not funny, is they never stopped that. After the war, they just turned that into Operation Gladio, which they used as an excuse to protect us from the Soviets. Right. And then they started using that for controlling black markets and trafficking arms and drugs and these sorts of things off the books, right? So wow, Ian Fleming, he's so interesting. I want to learn more. So then I thought, are any of these guys that he's working with involved in making the James Bond films? Because it would be really something to take Ian Fleming, who's in the Special Operations Executive. That's what this group is called. So this is a group of British soldiers that are basically trained to be spies, not only in Germany, but in America.
Right.
So children's author Ian Fleming, who wrote Chitty Chitty Bang Bang,
that's right,
is joined by Roald Dahl, who wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Right. These guys are all British spies working in America. Right. There's a brilliant book by the granddaughter of famous educator, Harvard president, and poison gas specialist James Bryant Conant. His granddaughter Jeanette Conant wrote a book called The Irregulars. The Irregulars was the name for the people who helped out. Who's that famous guy? Sherlock Holmes. Mm-hmm. They were the amateurs, right?
Yeah.
So while we called them from our side, Hoover gave
Baker Street Irregulars.
Baker Street Irregulars was the British name for these spies. Officially in America, they were called the British Security Coordination, because it sounds really boring. Yeah. You're not going to make a a movie called British Security Coordination. Right. You could make a movie called The Baker Street Irregulars or The Irregulars or these sorts of things. And so it's fascinating. So I looked at, who's editing these James Bond films. Oh, it's Sir Ken Adams. Let me see if I can find him here. Sir Kenneth Adam. There's no S. Sir Ken Adam. James Bond production designer.
Yeah.
So the guy who's designing the sets for these movies and also worked on Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey, Barry Lyndon, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Dr. Strangelove, Goldfinger, Moonraker, Spy, right? So this guy is not only a knight, but he's in the Special Operations Executive. And then when you go back and look at these other guys, let me see if there's somebody else here who might have had something to do with James Bond movies.
This is great.
Peter Fleming. Peter Fleming is Ian Fleming's brother. He's also a spy. He was a writer.
Yeah.
Richard Maybaum, is so he works for Cubby Broccoli and Ian Fleming. He's an OSS and Special Operations Executive guy. He works on Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Diamonds Are Forever, Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, License to Kill, Octopussy, he worked with Sean Connery, and The Spy Who Loved Me. Right? So here's a Special Operations Executive guy who worked with Ian Fleming during World War II.
Yeah.
And was, trained at Camp X. And, so you have all these layers.
He was also trained at Camp X?
Richard Maybaum was definitely a Special Operations Executive participant, and it's questionable. That's why I have Camp X off to the side and not above him. Now, Fleming, Camp X will be above him because there's a hard evidence connection. Yeah. So these are like the cousins, when you get over here. If I watch a movie, because there's a slide, you can grab it on the side here, Alan, and scroll down. So there's a bunch more
Oh,
side connections to Ian Fleming,
that is wild.
right?
That's great work.
So
That's really important. You know, you
Right.
do that, and that's real serious.
and then if there's too many at the bottom, they'll give you a slider at the bottom, and there's
Right.
too many here at the top, so I can slide over. And you can see Stuart Menzies was one of his bosses. So this thing called the Z Organization, which was influential on Fleming, because under the Z Organization, they owned this thing called London Films, which was an MI6 front company that employed Alexander Korda and his brother Zoltan Korda, right? Now, if you click Alexander Korda, so he's a spy for MI6 in the Z Organization, working for Sir William Stevenson in MI6. He's influenced by H.G. Wells. He's not only influenced, Alexander Korda is the director in the credits at the beginning of 1938's Things to Come, where H.G. Wells shows you the New World Order, which he also wrote a book called The New World Order. And the New World Order will be a worldwide religion. That religion will be technocracy, control of people through the use of technology, right? So here's Alexander Korda. He does Things to Come, working for London Films. London Films is later bought by Pinewood Studios. I can go there.
I didn't know that.
Right. And then you go back. So London Films also did The Jungle Book, which is Kipling's Freemasonic, and Kim, Keep in Memory, a spy training game for kids, and Things to Come. Well, this is getting even more fascinating. So let's
Kim, Keep in Memory.
Yeah, that's why Harold Kim Philby is trained as a spy, and Kermit Kim Roosevelt, who and these guys
keep in memory.
Right. It's a game they play to train spies.
Yeah.
And they taught it to the kids. And so Rudyard Kipling is making this popular culture on behalf of the British Empire to instill artificial scarcity, or the organic unity that the empire needs to procreate and continue under different names other than empire, like Commonwealth.
And that's when when I say it's a stretch, you don't know what's in their mind when Kipling wrote.
Okay.
You don't know.
So Kipling has an unpublished poem that it was included in a letter from Winston Churchill to FDR, and it's called "The Burden of Jerusalem." And this was Churchill's way of telling FDR, stay out of Palestinian politics, that we're in control of that. Right. He also wrote in 1898 a poem called "The White Man's Burden," which is encouraging America to, do this imperialism, empire building thing. So when you take, and he was really, 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 really good friends with Cecil Rhodes. So here he is. Yes, well, and I can turn you on to a researcher who can take you down that road, and I can get you all the data you need on that. But also out of Rhodes comes the Boy Scouts, and the Boy Scouts come back to the Special Operations Executive, this training of these spies. So let me just go back to the SOEs.
The Boy Scouts came out of Cecil Rhodes?
Yeah. Cecil Rhodes' friend, Lord Baden-Powell, is another one of Rhodes' colleagues.
The American Boy Scouts.
And the British. Here we go. So
I didn't know that.
Boy Scouts of America under the British Special Operations Executive. So you have all these, Boy Scout abuse, sex cover-ups, all these things going on, right?
Well, that's an interesting.
So here you go. So you got Kim's game, Keep in Memory. That's a game played by Boy Scouts. Right? Where's the other guy? Colonel John Skinner Belge Wilson is one of these key guys who's trained at Camp X. He's an acolyte of Cecil Rhodes. British intelligence is basically behind the creation of the Boy Scouts. But let me go back a page first. Lord Robert Baden-Powell is the guy who's credited all over the place. So he was a trainer of commandos. He helped to create the Girl Scouts. He helped create the scouting movement and the world organization of the scout movement. Robert Baden-Powell was an acolyte of Cecil Rhodes in the British South Africa Company and was part of this overall creation. And so what does it do? It provides a way to militarize American children, to get them to think in a collectivist way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I got a lot from it. I was in the Cub Scouts, and my dad was an Eagle Scout. I stopped going through Cub Scouts because it became uncool to be a Boy Scout at the time when I'm trying to interact with chicks. I don't want to go to the woods with men.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I already knew how to survive and light fires and do all that stuff because I grew up in the woods, you see. So I got those skills. So I was like, Cub Scouts was plenty of wearing the uniform and the tie, all that stuff. It was cool.
Time you would have gone through the whole
I also had an advantage is I had my dad's Wolf Bear and whatever the Weeblos manual was from back when he did it. So I'd already read his books when I got their books. They're almost identical. So I had already done all the stuff before I went, and so I had a good time with it. But that ended when it started getting a little weird.
Right.
And I didn't really call upon those skills anymore because I was going to work in the corporate world. But what you can see is when you investigate any of these institutions around us, it's not a conspiracy theory. This is just a train of history that has led things to be the way they are today.
Yeah.
So now let me go back into.
This is what I mean by how the world works. This is exactly
right
the kind of thing that means something to me,
and that I could use for myself to enter in the individual parts and then to connect it together with the other things it relates to, and then I have a way to show it to other people. So it's a form of art with practical application.
It sure is.
I call it the art of organizing data in formation, because the data is just data until you put it in formation. When you put it in formation, it becomes knowledge. When you understand that's wisdom if you share it with other people, which is what I try to do.
Well, there's no way that you could be more detailed with this, but the lines connecting.
Oh, you can, because you can add notes down here at the bottom. This is all full Word functionality, tags, all this sort of stuff.
All right, maybe you have done this, but a connection between two people or whatever, it doesn't tell you what kind of connection.
That's right. That's left up to whoever's going through their own learning process to decide that.
That's what I mean.
I'm just saying if you look for connections, you will see you will look, there's something to be learned.
What's the most tenuous?
This isn't my proof. This is my own map, so I can help myself when I forget stuff or how is this, because there's a lot to organize.
It's perfect for that. But as long as you know that in some cases, and this is just devil's advocate, that the connections may be tenuous, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. No, but that's bullshit on my part. It doesn't matter, because some of the connections are really. I mean, you could have it where they have different thicknesses of the lines, but I'm not saying you should do that. But some connections, like are going to be more. Not important is not the right word, but more robust than others, right?
Absolutely. So when I first started doing the model, let me see if I can go to like 9. Let me just put 9 in here. So there'll be a red line. There's a couple red lines, right? So I started trying to keep track of the connection. If you highlight, it says money, credit, loans, right? Mm-hmm. And what I found is the ability to model is not as fast as your ability and necessity to learn. Because what happens is when you look at 9/11, you're going to start opening up all these tabs in your Firefox or your Internet Explorer, and you want to drag those in where you see that they're connecting, right? And if you take time to stop and do all that label, that's why it's good I don't have them labeled, because that makes me question. Let me go back and read these pages again so that I understand it again, because I might make mistakes, and so I'm leaving it open that I make mistakes, and then over time, other people are going to say, hey, wait, this shouldn't be above, it should be beside, or what's your evidence? But let me go back to
talk about a starting point. It's more than that.
Right. So if I look into America's Eastern Establishment, Families, and Power Structure.
Whoa.
Right.
That has got to be a deep.
Or like American International Corporation, which is the predecessor of AIG, and this is a vehicle to fund the Soviets and the Chinese and the Nazis.
I remember that.
And all this sort of thing. So what you have is the people, how it came about above, and then things that came out of it below. And over here on the side, we might be able to find a book like America's Eastern Establishment, Skull and Bones. So in Anthony Sutton's book, there is references to the AIC, or in Eustace Mullins's books, there's references to the to AIC. So the Anglo-American Establishment, Tragedy and Hope, these all talk about American International Corporation. Right. So when I learn about something, I kind of put the source of where I learned off to the side. But that's only something I've done in the last 2 or 3 years, and this model has been going on for like 8 years.
That was my next question. So how long have you been doing this? 8 years?
Yeah, I started doing this. I used another product, and then in like 2004-ish, 2005. I discovered the Personal Brain, which is at thebrain.com, and it's a free piece of software. And in that free piece of software, you can pay for the higher levels of it, of course, if you want those features and functionality, but most people don't need that. I created the model, and out of that model, I output it as a brain zip file that other people can open in their free software and either add to it or change it or do whatever. So there's an online web version that if you're on the road and you want to see something, like I used it at PorcFest, I'm like, here's the online version. If I have it on my PC, it's right here. And the synchronization is voluntary, so I don't have to put any of this online. So you're not tied to being online, in other words. If you're working in the jungle or you're off-road or wherever, you can use it. It's on your hard drive. It'll run on any Windows or Macintosh operating system.
Can I get this?
Yeah, you can get it. I'll give it to you.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
But is it online? Like, this is the kind of thing I want to show my subscribers.
All right, so you just
you know what I mean?
This is
I've seen it. Yeah,
you've seen
show
the
me
community.
again. I've seen it on Tragedy and Hope.
Okay, so
but I for some reason
at the top,
I didn't go. I got to get into this, which I should have. Now that I see what it is. How in depth is the online version? Is it as in depth as what you have?
It's the exact same thing.
It is.
Yeah.
And where does it live? I mean, this is a dumb question.
It lives on my server.
It lives on your server.
Well, it can live a variety of places. Really.
No, but it's not so big that it's a problem.
No, it's not. It's not a problem at all.
No, it's just it's mainly text, right?
It's text and internet URL.
Okay, right. So yeah. Don't be surprised if I ask a really dumb question about internet stuff.
No, so you just go to tragedyandhope.com here.
Yeah, sure.
And at the top. Now here's the thing. Look, I make my own website, so
right.
This is one of the downsides. So I programmed all this myself. So when you go here, there's this thing, and it says right here, keep blocking. You have to disable protection. It says Firefox is blocked, blah blah blah.
Right.
When you do that and reload the page, maybe it'll do it right now. Then there's arrows next. There's drop downs that come.
Yeah.
So it's not that there's anything damaging. For some reason, the WordPress is not showing up anymore. So you lose all the
pop-ups that they try.
Right. So if you see me go into Trivium and I go down here to any of these different models, this will show up if you do that. Otherwise, you just see, the brain, and it'll take you to this page. So the drop down is entry doors into the same model, and then if you so it's on this page, and the link I think is where right here. This is the link, so you can check it out for free, and then it clicks on to something. Now this one is on the WebBrain. So it's hosted by the Personal Brain Company, and I'm allowed to do certain things for free because of how long I've had this. Right. But it's the most popular brain. Usually it's one of the first two on, if you go to the webbrain.com, it'll be one of the most recently updated, viewed, most popular, that sort of thing. And then in here at the top, you've got some different, like I call them doors into it. So you can go to critical thinking, removed from public schooling, if that's where you want to start, or if you want to start on the CFR.
That's a good one.
These are little, shortcut pieces up here. If you want to look into eugenics and population control, you've got this. If you want to look at the smart grid technology, but there's there's 6,000 of these things, so I can't put them all in pins, but these are the more interesting entries.
Right.
And then you can click here. This is really fun. You hit more pins. Look at that.
Wow.
So if you wanted to look at the, the origin of American intelligence and how that came about, there's this thing called the 20 Committee, or the Double Cross Committee, or in America, it's called X2. This is the counter-espionage branch, right? So that's going to come out of the British version of the 20 Committee, because it's 20 in Roman numerals, or it's a double cross. So they have all these different names, which is kind of clever and covert for them to do these sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And then you can read all about it down here, and I'm not going to bore you with it, but you got guys like John le Carré. He's a famous writer, right?
Yep.
You got guys like Ian Fleming. You got guys, Kim Philby, Henry Kissinger, Jesus Angleton. Well, it's actually James Jesus Angleton because it's a Spanish middle name. But the point is, Duncan Lee's a communist spy, and he's working for Wild Bill Donovan. He's his attaché or his secretary. And so when I started tracing the communist infiltration through McCarthyism and Cold War, I came back to British handlers. I came back to people who had Rhodes Scholars background and all this sort of internationalist idea. And I'm like, no wonder a lot of these guys never got prosecuted.
Right.
But under this, you have all sort the Arab Nazis are run under the double cross system. And who are they? Oh, well, they're right. So this is where Al Qaeda and Mujahideen, this is where Operation Gladio B, Osama bin Laden, this is all the things that are the excuse for taking away our rights today is right here in this history.
Yeah.
And if you look at Gladio B and bring it up, oh, look, there's 9/11, there's Benghazi,
Yep.
Here's Afghan opium production on the rise. So, I think U.S. funded Afghan police drug use and pedophilia. You want to see that article? You just click right here and it pops it up. And if I click here, on the WebBrain version, sometimes you have to click the attachment down here if it doesn't populate automatically. And it goes like that.
Oh, that's unreal.
Right? And then you can go
That's
back to
unreal.
but I don't have time to read that right now. So let me go back here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I can double click out of this and make it full. Not on this one. On this one, you have, on the web version, you have to do that. So you can make it full screen if you're going to look at something like this. Cecil Rhodes and his influence.
I don't think I've ever seen a more valuable research tool than this thing you've done.
It's the most valuable research tool I have because I created it because nothing like this existed.
Right.
I'm like, I need a map to that which exists that doesn't depend on my recall at any given time.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Do people, how many people know about this?
just the
I
people.
mean, I don't know why I asked that question like
Well,
I did.
I don't
But
advertise.
I mean, everybody should know about this.
Well, I think so too. I don't advertise, so basically the people who know about it are people who watch any of our video productions because I usually put it in there.
I do, but for some reason it didn't hit me how significant this is until now.
Yeah. Well, I'm also trying to fly a little bit under the radar, do useful things without coming up with too much resistance. So I can't I don't want to go on TV and be like, hey, here's an infomercial for this, because there's a lot, like, this is my map to show the official story of just about everything.
You can't have it both ways. You either want, you know what I mean? Can you?
Well, here's the thing. The people that, start thinking for themselves and come across our work, it's natural. It's like,
that's absolutely right.
Yeah,
it's not, it's my weakness that I didn't realize.
You want to see a lot of improvement.
Here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now,
so, like, for instance,
what you've been doing, is this recorded on the?
I got this camera and I got the audio and I got these two cameras, but mine ran out of memory there for a second.
So we can't see.
You can see this. I got this. It's on screen capture.
Is it okay? Okay, good.
Right? Yeah, isn't that good thinking?
That's perfect. Yeah. No, because I want to be able to show when you're talking about
and
it.
I want to show you when you're talking about it. I want to show it and both.
Yeah, I don't have. I'm just going to be sitting there going, "Wow, that's not a big deal."
Let's look at Lord Randolph Churchill. Who's he come from? He comes from a family that's big into masonry. He comes from the Spencer family that's related to Lady Diana Spencer,
yeah, sure.
George Spencer Churchill. But there's also the Duke of Marlborough, because that's the title he holds. And I'm sorry, Lord Randolph Churchill was Winnie's daddy, right? So he's also a Duke of Marlborough. And so when you see Winston Churchill in charge of, the Black Chamber in World War I and Lusitania and all these other things, and then you see him going to be prime minister, it's like that's how he cut his teeth from 1905 to 1920, whatever. And so you see he comes from a family that's being groomed. That's into eugenics and into class system and all these other things. Right. And then there's all these American presidents, all these American politicians who have to quote Churchill. They love quoting Churchill, right? And so this is part of, let me see where the here's special relationship. It's a special relationship, much like that of like 60-year-old dude and 13-year-old girl or something. It's like it's not a good special relationship that we have between the United States. And so that starts in there's ideas. I mean, so we can look at it like this. Special relationship starts with the British East India Company and the opium and the slavery and all that sort of stuff. And then it is strengthened in World War I. And then you come to 1943 and there's joint surveillance agreements, which this is what GCHQ and NSA are using today. It's the 1943 British USA, right? So there's the Atlantic Charter Conference where we're like, we all have to get together against the Nazis who are being funded by the same people doing this.
Right.
And so this is what I call the British infiltrated. There's two goals. After 1812, it's the British recolonization of America. That's an agenda. And then a sub-agenda in the 20th century is British infiltration of the American intelligence community. And once they do that, they then work on the Soviet infiltration of the American intelligence community so that America won't know that Britain's not our friend. And so there's this whole layering. And, it's the wilderness of mirrors that Angleton talks about.
Yes.
So then, you can look at any of these things. There's the optic nerve program. That's a GCHQ spying program. There's the Manhattan Project. That's part of the special relationship. There's the Joint Threat Research Intelligence Group. They're interesting. Let's click on them to see what they do. And you could go to I could just click it like this maybe. And their Wikipedia page is right here at the bottom, and you can scroll down on the side or go to it by clicking here. So there's a lot of different options, but really off to the side, you can see, they're in the news lately. The Snowden leaks, the Snowden documents, all these different articles are talking about the JTRIG, the Joint Threat Research Intelligence Group. Well, what kind of things do they like to do over there? Well, the CIA believes, says it believes in congressional oversight in response to the Senate spying charges. You got some different news under here. GCHQ has an entire program for playing dirty tricks, including honeypots and all this other stuff. And then you can click and go to the article, or like I said, you have to click here, I think. and you can bring that up to read for later.
Right.
And this is something that is hitting anyone with a cell phone, an internet connection that doesn't know about the dark side of technology that's being developed. It is the real it's the real motivation between all the technological development. So I can go back to GCHQ because this is like before we created the NSA, GCHQ had been around for almost 50 years doing what it does. So, through many of the intelligence and espionage books that I've read from the British, the British spies working on us, right? They, basically say that the Americans are naive and that we had no idea about intelligence and espionage because we hadn't been doing this. But the British Empire had been doing this for hundreds of years. The East India Company created, what became MI6 and MI5 and all these sorts of things. So they've just really shined up a bunch of things that don't need to be shined or can't be shined. So there's an interesting guy like Norman Holmes Pearson. Now, I had never heard of him. Let me put it that way. I'm not going to accuse other people of not knowing about him. Yeah. I'm going to say I didn't know who this guy was until the head of the double cross system for Britain, John Cecil Masterman, wanted to print the double cross report, the double cross system report. And in Britain, there's some law that they can't disclose secrets or whatever. And then he got it printed in America. And I said, how'd he get it printed in America? Well, there's this guy, Norman Holmes Pearson, he went to, and he got it all worked out. He gets it printed. And I'm like, who is Norman Holmes Pearson? Oh, he worked in the British Special Operations Executive for John Cecil Masterman. So he's and he's a Yale professor on literature. And so there's just all these layers. And he's the grooming man and handler for James Hesus Angleton. And Angleton was groomed in Britain and spoke with a British accent. And, he can't find the mole because I think after reading all this, now this is my opinion and I haven't spoken much opinion, but I think Angleton was a British mole. Mm-hmm. I think Angle was the dangle. I think they put him out there and we're like, he's a good guy to have in charge of the OSS and CIA and OPC and all these other things that he was doing. And it's Angleton, the Oracle, who inspired the creation of the database. And the Oracle database was a Pentagon project paid for with DIA and CIA money. And Larry Ellison became owner of that out of that project. And the guy who helped to create the database on that project, not the author, but a guy who worked on that project, created another company 40 years later that I worked for that does artificial intelligence. So he's no dummy. And at the time they brought out the relational database, he said it's all going to be in this binary, large object blob database, object-oriented database. And that's what's going on today. So there's this history between technology development and military industrial complex, and it's what made the media industrial complex possible.
Right.
So when the media industrial complex is lying to us, it's because the military has developed technology and the psychologists and cyber warfare people have figured out how to use words in such a way to make us believe things that aren't true. And that covers just about everything we talked about, from 9/11 to JFK to Zapruder film or whatever. People believe things that are not true, and we offer them a systematic approach to learn their way out of that.
Wow. Is there a search feature on this?
Yeah, it's right. It's right here.
So you the name will come up in whatever connection.
So the reason that Ezra Pound ended up in prison and that Angleton put him there was because Holmes Pearson was a handler of Hemingway and Pound and all these other guys that Angleton later handled. So the intellectual elite, the intelligentsia, are being managed and groomed by this Anglo-American system of intelligence. Now, let's say we want to talk about somebody who's not here in the picture. You just type their name in this little search box right here. Let's see. Who's an interesting dude that you want to talk about from the 20th century? I have it in here from thousands of years.
Stick to writers. I don't know. Steinbeck.
Oh. I don't know how much. No, I don't have John Steinbeck in there. No Grapes of Wrath yet. But let's put in Huxley.
Oh, definitely. Huxley.
So now we'll see everything that comes up with Huxley. There's a whole bunch of stuff.
But
here's Aldous Huxley. And so from there, so you've got his influences above and you got a scroll bar. So you can go to his dad, Leonard Huxley, who was the son, in the Huxley family. And you can go to Thomas Henry Huxley, who was Darwin's bulldog, and get into evolution and agnosticism. And so here's how this works. So Thomas Henry Huxley was Charles Darwin's biggest advocate, and he's a real famous dude. You can read about him. But he was the tutor and teacher of H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells was the tutor and teacher of Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley was the tutor and teacher of George Orwell, right?
Right.
So you can, and let's see, under there, what is it? I thought I saw something right here. Gnostic Media, maybe episode 170, Brendan Todd Fahey, Captain Al Hubbard. So there's this whole, I was listening to this. I said, oh, Aldous Huxley information contained in there. I put it under Aldous Huxley. Now, I can't do that for every podcast I listen to and things like this, but when I find something substantial, like that's produced by a colleague of mine named Jan Irvin, and I said, okay, this is how I'm going to remember it. I'm going to put it in the brain. You send me an article on whatever, I'm going to attach it to that which I already know and expand my world.
Right.
So what people are getting in the various models of the, because I have the older versions of the model and stuff, you can see how it grows. And so even if you're not doing anything, at very least, if you're just in the mood to watch, you're going to continue growing. If you're in the mood to add to it, you can do that too. So I just try to make it reflective of nature and copy what's natural.
It's fucking brilliant, dude. It really is. The judgments you have to make, I'm just thinking of judgments, would be like, I don't know, Orwell, his connections. What does that mean about him as a human being? That's what you have to figure out, right?
Well, but that's how you get to know Orwell. Read that he was a policeman in India under the Raj, and
But I mean, for example, whose side is he on? That's one way. Is he trying to lie to us?
Is he helping you or hurting you? That's up to you.
That's
it's
what
yet
I mean.
to be decided.
That's what the person using this decides.
Yeah.
These connections are not judgmental.
Yeah. If you go to 1984 and that book scared you from reading anything ever again, I'd say Orwell's hurting you. If he wrote something that scares you out of learning. But,
but that's not fair.
But if you can learn from it, if you can say there's metaphors here, and these metaphors,
that's your limitation. If it scared you out of reading,
absolutely.
But I guess what I mean is when if you click like Hemingway, you as a person have to judge by all the connections and all the things and your instinct whether he's a good guy or that's as simple as I get. He got founded by the Fed. Is his agenda negative to us or not?
He got hounded by the Fed. Let's just go to Hemingway. Here he is, right? So he gets hounded by the Feds, and he's possibly driven to suicide over it.
Yeah.
Right. So did FBI surveillance push Ernest Hemingway to the brink of suicide? That's an article. So these are different articles pertaining to these things. But I do know that he was handled by Norman Holmes Pearson of the OSS, who is the liaison that sat in on the X2 counterespionage branch of the 20 committee. That he was also handled by Angleton.
When you say handled, though, that's another judgment call. What you mean by that, right? I mean, because I have pictures. He calls you up and tells you what to do, or handle could be he's a social friend that tries to convince you. Do you know what I mean? Okay,
so you're right. There is a spectrum.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a spectrum, and the spectrum is whittled down by saying, okay, here's pictures of Ernest Hemingway with all these spies.
You use this to whittle it.
Yeah. Well, I use it for myself to, how much refined granularity do I need on Ernest Hemingway at any given time? Right now, I've put in stuff because I didn't study him specifically. These are things I came across while I was studying other things about him. So I was like, I'll store that there for later. But now if I really want to get into it, I'd be like, okay, how much evidence is there that he was actually with Holmes Pearson and Angleton? And how many pictures are there of these guys together during that time of war, et cetera, et cetera? And do you not think that they could enlist a popular writer during a time of war to write these things?
Or maybe they tried and failed.
Sure.
You don't know.
Sure.
Until you look further into it.
Absolutely. And so in that case, I think they tried and failed. But people like Noel Coward and Ian Fleming and Roald Dahl, these other British spies, they tried and succeeded, and those guys were fine, and they lived in the Caribbean and ran casinos with Meyer Lansky and Office of Naval Intelligence because they're all in cahoots.
Yeah.
And they even tell you the special operations executive used a certain bank to launder money through to create Las Vegas and all this other stuff. It's like it's all in their history. We just have to read it instead of arguing about, I wasn't told that, so it can't be true. It's like, no, you got to look at what exists.
Yeah, anybody that still thinks that way is maybe hopeless.
So it's a tool for thinking people.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is.
I mean, you got F. Scott Fitzgerald. I don't have hardly anything in there except he exists and he had these connections because I came across this.
That's an interesting example.
Or here's
look into further.
Well, sure. And here's a book by a guy named Neil Gabler called An Empire of Their Own: How the Jews Invented Hollywood. Now, Neil Gabler is a Jewish author. This is a book where they're very proud, right? And he talks, and Edward Epstein refers to this book. This is one of the primary sources used by Edward J. Epstein in the creation of his own writings, right? And so all these things are out there, but what you can find out is like people like Louis B. Mayer
Wow.
His agent. Where's
I'm
his
getting
agent
the
here?
chills looking at this.
All right,
shit.
so let's see.
Because
Maybe
Hollywood is.
maybe it wasn't there,
man.
but it was. Let's go to MGM maybe. Selznick, Man from Uncle. There was one of these guys, and I was like, holy shit, his agent is a British spy. Oh, here we go. Cedric Belfrage was an MI6 agent working in British security coordination, part of the Jacob Golis communist spy network that was mapped out in the 50s under Operation Venona, which was a spy tap program where they found all these communists but didn't have the processing power to run the tapes and figure out who was who till years later. And,
Right.
sorry, we didn't have the processing power that went on.
Right.
Well, Cedric Belfrage was involved with Birth of a Nation, and he was the agent for Samuel Goldwyn. So Sam Goldwyn in Hollywood has an agent who's an MI6 agent and a spy, legit spy, right? And if I don't believe that, I can click on one of these links around here. How does it work when I do it on here? There we go. You have to click that. So, I mean,
yeah, right. And then you find, oh man, you could do a whole sub one of these just about Hollywood.
yeah,
that would
absolutely.
take up
And it would probably take,
gigabytes.
and it would probably take, no, it wouldn't take that much. It would just take like 6 months of
more
reading
time.
through the various books, because that was just one book that I was using as an example, but I'm using it as an example that is not, it's not an opinion. That's just, out there. Yeah. So, it's connected to, because if it's like, what else mentions MGM? This book, Blood, Class, Nostalgia, Anglo-American Ironies by Christopher Hitchens. Look at all that's in here. Aldous Huxley, All Souls College, and all these different things that people have heard of, but not really connecting. I mean, there's,
What do you think of Christopher Hitchens?
Well, I wasn't a big fan of most of his work, but that particular book is very valuable to Americans. If you read it and understand what's going on, he tells you, he's like, here's how the British made you guys just like them. He's like, step by step, you've adopted this, hereditary succession is the next thing to come probably, right? I mean, so that's just one book, but like to learn about a guy like Ian Fleming, you can look off to the side on how many different books. So here's the slider. So there's different people he's connected to, but there's the Blood, Class, and Nostalgia. So he's talked about in that book. He's talked about in this book called Cloak and Gown, Scholars in the Secret War, 1939-1961. This is an excellent book. We'll tell you all about Angleton, Norman Holmes Pearson, Hemingway, all these different writers that they handled. And it's an academic book. It's not a conspiracy book, and it's pretty expensive. So have fun trying to find a cheap copy, everybody. That's how non-conspiratorial it is. They say, we'll keep it away from you by making it expensive. And I said, try me. Right. So there's.
I'm blown away. I can't even tell you. I'm thinking of the Hitchens. Look,
what do you got?
What happened to him? I mean, he got to the point where he believed in the war on terror and stuff. I mean, what's with that?
I think
he looked at 9/11. I mean, I've got a clip of him saying 9/11 does not have to be looked into. We were told by the commission.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody that says that, well, I'm tempted to say I don't want to read a word he says. I'm tempted.
I think he's a utopian socialist, as I pointed out there. And
do you think he believed that when he said that?
No, I don't even care if he did believe it. It's not accurate or reflective of the evidence. So either way, I got to dismiss it as arbitrary.
It is different to me if he's lying or if he's an idiot.
Yeah. Well, I would say we'd have to collect more evidence. He comes from a background where they basically could say, if you don't lie right now, you'll never publish another book. Like you've gone too far over the line. Like, when do you notice that his attitude changed? After 9/11?
Yeah, it was pretty much
after he was like, holy shit, the people I work for are really bloodthirsty and ruthless people. And he could see it coming, but he didn't know what they would ever go to. Right. But as soon as that happens, he's like, oh, I better shut the fuck up.
Yeah, but was it a double think thing, or did he know it when he took a shit? Did he sit there thinking, I would like to think everybody.
I would like to think it was a double think thing.
Yeah, me too. I think that's what happens much more often than we think.
Yeah.
With people that they're not lying. That's not lying.
Yeah, and he's also not.
You're fucking nuts.
He's not going out of his way to look into all the things that most people are looking into these days. Right. And if it wasn't presented through some sort of Oxford circle of this is in the back of the magazine, look at these other books. Like in Foreign Affairs, it gives you a reference in the back of the magazine. It's like, here's all the other books we're promoting right now that back the agendas that are in the issue and that sort of stuff. So. So it's just fun to have a way to, capture some of this stuff on the screen. And
Fun is not quite the right word for
well,
it. Come
well,
on.
it's learning and learning.
No, that is fun, but it's a bit deeper than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like under the American International Corporation, you can go to the Flying Tigers, and who are they? Oh, that's this, a bunch of good service guys, Americans over in China. Well,
Right.
not when guys in the Flying Tigers are
Running
also
drugs.
smuggling. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's right. So you go back to just like the history of opium and heroin trafficking, and now we're looking at our culture.
Right.
This is America.
That's probably the biggest.
This is America, and the only thing that's probably bigger than that would be this page. Oh, camera lady.
My-
he needs to, well, he doesn't need to do anything.
No, just give me a couple seconds on the camera because my card's been out for a while. So I just want
Since I saw you last, my mind has been
it's already
blown,
shut off. Just give it back.
Lisa.
What's that?
Since I saw you last, my mind has been completely blown.
Really?
I didn't have any idea what he was really up to.
We try to keep that to people that won't do the wrong things with it. Like, I don't want someone saying, okay, this guy needs to be killed, because the guy I learned this from was an artist named Mark Lombardi who died on 3/22/2000, and he made art in picture and pencil
Yes,
form.
I know about him.
Okay,
Oh, I didn't
Yeah,
turn it off
he-
before I.
it doesn't matter. Just start
Yes,
it.
I know. You're right. He was New Yorker, right?
Yeah, he was a New Yorker. He lived in New York City. I think he lived in Brooklyn.
Yeah,
to be more specific.
He was killed in a way that doesn't look good.
Yeah, well, it was allegedly suicide inside of his locked apartment. But then when you look
Right.
at the police report and the nature of his art and who bought his art and who published,
Right.
like Judith Rothschild Foundation published his book. So his book, Global Networks, is published by the Judith Rothschild Foundation. The Whitney Museum, which the Whitney family was instrumental in creating Skull and Bones and opium trafficking and the money laundering that he was tracking. His pieces, like the BCCI piece, or the piece that's even on the cover, shows the Bush family in business with the Bin Laden family and Salim bin Laden and Osama bin Laden. And Salim bin Laden was meeting with the Bush family on the morning of September 11th for Carlyle Group. So it's like, once he took the information, made the visual connections, it's not like, I'm going to look at this. It's like, no, I'm going to study this. I'm going to go home and look this stuff up so I can understand. He's communicating that there's a possibility to understand some of these things, or at least that there are connections that exist. And maybe if you think about them, you can figure it out. And so my buddy came over. He's like, oh, what you're doing is a lot like this artist I just saw. And I said, oh, well, who is he and where can I learn about? He's like, oh, he's dead.
Right.
And I was like, oh, how he died? Oh, that's not good. And so then I was like, well, wouldn't it be great if there was an electronic form of his art? Because they took it off the circuit, basically, so you can't see it. And the only documentary that's been made is one that just came out, and it's made in German. So, it doesn't even have English subtitles yet that I saw.
But it was in the Whitney Museum, the one.
And the Jewish Museum and the MoMA.
Modern art.
Right. So that's a Rockefeller, so there's.
So how does that figure? Did they just say it slips in between the cracks, or is it purposeful that they're going to put that up there about the Bush family, even though it's the Whitneys?
Yeah, well,
how does that work?
I think,
I don't know.
They figure who's going to do anything about it, because there's so.
Or do they even figure anything?
Well, yeah,
maybe they don't.
Are
even
the Whitneys?
Think about it.
What do they tell to because they lie to each other? So how much truth? So I figured if you could get to a higher level of certainty than the people who've been bullshitting themselves on the other side of the fence, right? Then you have an advantage. And I said, if I could put it together electronically such that it could be shared with other people and other people could have copies of what I have.
Well, it's like a multi-dimensional version of his art.
Yeah, it's self-preservation. You know what I mean?
It's like going.
And you can do this thing right here. This is kind of cool. Let's see. Wander. And now it's going to just sit here and crawl through. All the stuff you're about to see is all connected. So in 5 minutes, you'll see this thing and be like, how is that connected?
Oh, that's cool.
Right? And so it'll just kind of go through on its own. But let me go back to this Rothschild dynasty and see if it'll go from there. All right, so that's Hanover. And now it's just cruising around, the history. Right? Or I can turn Wander off. And I can go back. So if you want to see what's in there that you don't even know to search for, you can do Wander.
Right.
I can click back with these buttons, and I can go to Rothschild. So now out of this single banking family, you can get to like the genealogies of the Rothschilds, or, Meyer Amschel Rothschild. And then from here, you get the banking dynasty. Wait, which one? Let me go back here. It's above it. So this is where a lot of things connect into, and you've got a drop down scroll on this side, and you've got one down here, and there's not one up above because these are the fundamental ideas that are inspiring this. So you can call it kleptoparasitism, or to be more specific, a Rothschild term coined in 1958 is intraspecific kleptoparasites, which means people who prey, plunder, pillage from people of their own species or from beings of their own species.
Right.
And so Miriam Rothschild, let's see where she's at.
Well, what do they mean by that?
Well,
do they mean the Jews
No.
or the family or
No, basically what she was talking about directly from the study was they were studying gulls. So as you know, the Rothschilds have a lot of investments in studying nature so they can figure out how to crack and control humanity, right? And so they've got all these different things going on there. There's a lot of different species. There's species of a giraffe and all insects all named after Rothschild.
So it was actually
so Miriam Rothschild
a
was
zoological term.
It was a zoological term used on gulls in like Antarctica that were stealing food from other gulls.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's interesting that some animals plunder their own species.
And some
then I thought, is that going on here? And so their term was interspecific, or I think it was intraspecific in that form that she did in 1958. But again, it's Miriam Rothschild probably doesn't know the whole history of her family. She just knows that they had a lot of money and that they gave all their stuff to the state and they still have it. Right, because that's how so if you go up today, so like Evelyn Rothschild,
they still have it. It's funny.
Where's Miriam here?
They gave it to the state and they still have it.
Right.
What does that mean?
Well,
I mean, I know what it means. I was being goofy.
Evelyn Rothschild. No, that's a good question. The Fleming family also has some interesting intermarriages, but let me go to Sir Evelyn Rothschild. All right, so he's the son of Anthony Gustave, and he's coming from Rothschild Frere, which is Rothschild Brothers in France. He's part of these different organizations. He went to Cambridge, but aside from Congressional Quarterly, which is what we use as a newspaper for our Congress, and Roll Call and Reuters and Economist that they all manage and control, London School of Economics. Let me find what I was looking for. Let's see. Maybe I didn't put it in here. Okay. Well, let me do this because I realize it seems like it's not connecting what I'm about to say, but I have to just type this other word.
Okay. I trust you on that.
Houses, maybe? No.
Before I forget, this is backed up in a lot of places.
Oh yeah,
right?
Totally. It's backed up, distributed to thousands of other conscious minds.
Here.
Yeah, it's not just here. No.
Okay, good.
Okay, so what I wanted to show you is something that I guess I haven't put in here yet, and occasionally I do learn something and not put it in here, so this is a good thing.
Okay.
Let me just go to Sir Evelyn de Rothschild's page, and I want the British banker and soldier. No, that was his uncle. How about this guy? Nephew of that guy. All right, so he's a British financier, and here's all the stuff. So when you see Anthony Gustave Rothschild, all the stuff that's in purple right here is a link I've clicked that I've already put in the brain. So if he's the director of De Beers Consolidated Mines and his family funded Cecil Rhodes and Cecil Rhodes created De Beers, it makes sense why he's still on the board, 120 years later, right? Well, I looked up, I thought, who is this guy and where does he live? Okay, so I clicked this Rothschild family thing. So I found out where he lived, and I was like, it's one of these houses. Now let me just scroll down. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit Control Plus. So I can just, on the screen capture here. So here's some of the houses. A Rothschild house, Waddesdon Manor, donated to the charity by the family in 19... So they created this thing called the Public Trust, and then they donate their huge buildings to the Public Trust.
Right.
And then Evelyn de Rothschild still lives in a building that's donated to the Public Trust.
Right.
And a couple days a week, he lets them take a tour of his house. But these are their palaces. You've never seen anything like them by any billionaire on Forbes' list, and they have like 30 of these that they protect in various ways and various schemes.
In the UK?
Mostly in the UK, France, but they really all over the world.
Right.
And so as I kept going down the page, I kept seeing like, here's just more and more and more and more. And you can go back to this wiki page after you watch this video and look at it for yourself. But, more, the Austrian branch, the Naples branch, Jewish identity and positions on Zionism, like totally created it. They're straight up. Like I have Walter Rothschild's books. I have Simon Schama's books. I have all the books. They were working on this for 150 years before they created Israel in 1947, 48, right? So it's all right here. You can go to the Jewish Encyclopedia of 1907. It still says the same thing. More houses, right? More houses. This is not something. This is art. It's not arbitrary. Chateau Lafite, one of the most popular wines in the world.
Yeah.
Oh, Rothschild.
Yep.
Right. Here's castle. Look at the castles. I mean, come on. This is stuff that it's like even guys who are kings and dictators don't think this big.
Right.
So
Right.
this is the power behind crowns and the power behind governments and the fact that they, basically invented international. I'm still going through houses here on the screen capture if you're looking.
Shit.
Right. The fact that they created international finance. Now someone's going to say, "Oh, that's Wikipedia." Well, if you get down to the bottom of Wikipedia, they have all the primary sources, and you can click into all this stuff where they got it because it's not bullshit. Don't let yourself take an intellectual shortcut that leads you to some place that's not truth. Here are the references. Now you can go, conspiracy theories in American history. I'm not talking about conspiracy theories. I'm just talking about the history of money and finance in our country as we know it.
Yeah.
And so. Rothschild family international banking dynasty is something that I've got all their own biographies and autobiographies and anything that's available that's credible and legible and
right.
But it goes somewhere, not nowhere, and there is an end to the rabbit hole, and the end starts with you figuring out how to discern fact from fiction, discern reality from illusion, to use your mind with reason, and then you can start to learn that which exists. And only once you have gained all that knowledge can you effectively resist it, and more importantly, make their model obsolete, which is what we're trying to do. That's freedom. What do you think? Tell a friend.
Yeah, no kidding.
No, your buddy Walter. You want to be friends with him in the future? You want to get him past his denial? I think we could talk him through.
I don't think so.
He's at the end of his photographic career. He doesn't have to worry about public. He can start to think for himself at this point. He's been plenty famous. Look, when you showed me some of the pictures he did when you were having that conversation, I was like, I've seen this guy's photos for my life.
That's right.
Like Michael Jordan, all those. It's like, so doesn't he deserve
he's
to
one
live?
Of the best.
Doesn't he deserve to live a couple years just in freedom and truth? And because there is a relationship between truth and freedom, Walter. And if you're not free, if you're not being truthful with yourself, you're not free. That's the thing. Don't lie. Don't steal. Those are the two things that we need to just do as human beings. Everything would be cool and we could all surf. I would have time to get away from the desk and learn how to surf if we could just do that. And if we could do that with Walter, I would think that would lead and encourage other people to do likewise. So maybe a small step in the right direction is called for.
Yeah, thanks for doing that thing about Walter. It's not. He's really angry at me, but not for the video.
He's angry with himself, really.
Oh yeah, that's where it comes down to.
People can handle the truth, but they need it in a proper, pace. They can't take it all at once. Nobody can. So that's what every day is for. You learn a little bit.
He's angry because he knows, and like some people just will never ever be able to break through. Maybe he can, maybe he can't. I'm standing there with his two sons who are both photographers. They're both talented. And I'm showing them stuff, which if we get around to it, I'll show you, that is so obvious about things that happened on 9/11, about the sunlight, for example.
Absolutely.
Being shining on one side of the buildings, and in another picture from the same moment in time, it's not.
Yep.
Right? And that's, to me, as a photographer, he should say that can't be. And I have him on film for like a half an hour rationalizing how the sun could be shining on the one side of the building and at the same moment not shining on it because the camera angle's a little bit different. I mean, it's so sad to watch a guy of that talent.
You know why it works though? Because he can look at movies and see things like, for instance, movies, dialogue scenes are artificially lit. They'll light one person, then they'll light the other. And so people think, oh, maybe reality looks like. But no, film is a lie. Film is a lie. Like today, we didn't add extra light, but you have to have artificial microphones, and really you do need light, and there's other things that have to be done. So really, when you make a fictional narrative, it's like you're telling a lie that you want people to think is true so that they can actually take the message from it
that they're not
and grow. Because you're not trying to break people. You're trying to help people figure out how they work so they can fix themselves, and then we can all.
But you're right. They get through subconsciously. but you know what I mean. He's a photographer, and he's saying things literally 2 + 2 = 5, and pointing right at it and go. I mean, I haven't edited that part of it because it was too sort of discouraging. But he's really pointing at an apple and going, "That's not an apple. That's a model car or something." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm trying to, and then he gets mad at me and goes, "Doesn't matter what I say. You're going to keep, and it just." But it's really a power that making this film for 7 years, I figured out on a gut level just how powerful that double. Orwell really did have that part right about doublethink, and it's funny. People don't read that book has lasted so long because people that are put it this way, like Christopher Hitchens writes a book called Why Orwell Matters. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
I'm not, but I did pick it up because after
I read it because I was doing a thing.
He's got some on Thomas Jefferson too that I picked that I haven't read yet because I haven't had the need to.
I mean, he doesn't even mention the fact that Orwell would look at the war on terror and say, "Of course, it's not real." At least theoretically, he would.
He would say Oceania has always been at war with East Asia.
Right, but here's the thing: Hitchens writes a book called Why Orwell Matters and doesn't bring up what Orwell's last book was 1984, and the theme of it is that war is never, ever what it's fought for the reasons it said. Right. And that's what the book is about.
Orwell could have read Smedley Butler's book War is a Racket in 1935 and said, "I want to make a fictional narrative about something like this."
He could, he could have. Well, but Hitchens, I think, doesn't even mention that in a book called Why Orwell Matters. I think he's got to be Orwellian.
Look, he's close to psychological warfare. I don't want to make any judgments. He's not here to defend himself, but you have to take it with a grain of salt. He's coming from the British Empire perspective. He lives in America, but he's another.
But then here's what I say to that: then don't fucking write a book called Why Orwell Matters. That's what I say. I don't let him. I don't care if
that's your blurb
dead.
for the back of the reprint.
I don't care if he's not here to defend himself.
Don't do it.
Don't write a book that says that if you're not going to mention what Orwell, and then you're going to believe in the war on terror.
Right.
And then you're going to write a book at the same moment.
I would have to forget too much. And that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Did he forget?
How did he have to? That?
You're right. Okay. So if he knew it in the first place, then I would say it's dishonest. If he didn't and just had he had his own Encyclios Paideia, this artificial scarcity of knowledge that juxtaposes the larger world that's available. So either way.
Yeah.
I'd leave it up to the individual because I might not be right.
Yeah.
So I want people to think for themselves.
I rarely, I usually am in your camp saying I could be wrong on this.
I like to speak with diffidence just because I'm always learning every day.
Well, and plus it works better too, to speak with a little diffidence. But there are certain times when I just get too pissed off, when I go, I don't like.
And I can relate to that too.
It's like this. My friend who interviewed me that I told you about did just hopeless. A year ago, he's reading a book by Hampton Sides called Hellhound on His Trail about a very recent book, a year or two ago, about James Earl Ray and how he killed Martin Luther King and all that.
Really?
Yeah, and my friend's reading this book, and I said,
"Don't you know about the court case?
Yeah, don't you know about the trial
and the evidence?"
And he didn't know anything about it, and it pissed him off.
And no one would tell him. The editor wouldn't tell him. They'd be like, "Go ahead, write something that defends the official story. We don't care. We want you to do that."
But what's important to me is not so much this scumbag Hampton Sides, but Doubleday publishes it. Doubleday.
Yeah.
I mean, they have lawyers and fact checkers.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you already know all this.
Yeah.
You're looking at.
I'm looking at it.
You're looking at it.
I don't think
there.
Doubleday's in there, but a lot of the publishers.
Well, they're
not. I mean, they're there to keep enough of the propaganda and rhetoric in circulation. And every now and then they publish something that's a little edgy, and because there are individuals all over these corporations making decisions in government, law enforcement, wherever. You can always hope that your work lands in front, and they say, "Oh, I'm gonna make this my job to make sure it gets done,"
and it slips through the cracks.
Right, because the rest of the stuff's getting pushed through the cracks. So every now and then they let something
like Hellhound on His Trail. Yeah. That came from the top.
Yeah.
To ignore all the...
Or even maybe David Ray Griffin. I mean, Richard Falk is the guy who wrote the foreword, and he's CFR, and what
That's
you know.
interesting.
Yeah, there's a line of
Yeah,
thinking,
'cause
and then
he could be limited hanger.
well, and then if you look at the 9/11 truth community and you ask the questions like, who was David Ray Griffin? What did he do before this?
Right, yes.
Theological,
That's really
okay,
important.
Claremont, okay, and then who are some of these other people? Oh, one of the guys in the 9/11 truth movement wrote his thesis on David Ray Griffin's work years before 9/11. But these guys are supposedly like independent guys that aren't
Right.
working together. And I'm,
Right.
And then it's like I came across Stephen E. Jones in this documentary from 1989 called
Cold Fusion or something?
it was a cold fusion documentary. I was trying to learn about energy.
Right.
Here's this guy I just saw in the 9/11 video. I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Who's been paying his bills? Who are his contracts? Even though he left the university, he always worked for Lawrence Livermore Laboratories.
Right.
And when someone like Judy Wood's talking about energy weapons, it's like, oh, those are the exact type of problems that Stephen E. Jones was working on.
Right.
So he's the guy I could say, look at this, and anyone who gets close to the room, he can kind of like guard that position. Then Judy Wood, look, I know that there's something more to be learned here, but the absence of identification is the problem. And so unless you can identify that which did whatever she's talking about with all these, kind of flowery language, it's like, let's identify the project, give it a name. What was the device? How does it work? These are the effects. Okay, does that match the evidence? We got to start making and breaking hypotheses.
She tried to do that.
And I have her book, and I have a great deal of respect for her and her intellect and her audience and everything.
I have less respect for her audience.
We're all trying to figure things out for ourselves, and so we all have to go through this process. I'm just saying that in the absence of identification, what we need is not arguments about that. We need a search for the identification of that which matches those characteristics, which, who's a Russian scientist?
With the bomb.
With the bomb, right. So either way, like we just have to make and break a hypothesis. It's like, does this fit?
You can break the
fit?
Russians like that.
Yeah, right. Well,
there's no seismic.
But there's also similarities. It's like parts, so there's like similarities and contradictions in all of these. And it's like, I think it's because what we're trying to describe is something that no one's really seen before.
Yeah.
And so that is something that we should all be focused on. And
do you think the closest thing to explaining the demolitions are mini nukes?
I don't have an opinion on that. I just look at whatever's available.
Yeah.
I would describe the state of those buildings after they were standing as a deverticalization.
Well, they were gone though.
Yeah,
there wasn't a pile.
Sure. I mean, I can all these things.
To me, I got to tell you before we.
There's just a lot of anomalies and contradictions, and some of them they're put there on purpose for psychological warfare, and some of them are the genuine anomalies, which is why they put the other ones there, so that we can't tell. I know. So it has all the hallmarks of psychological warfare from soup to nuts, and there's a 100-year history and funding, and people want to do that, and the buildings were being downgraded in real estate, and they're going to lose the money and they couldn't tear them down because of insurance. So there's all these things in play. Right. America needed another war. All these things, right? They had an Arab Nazis. They had on the payroll. They could use, Al Qaeda and put them in position, make Osama the bad guy, and all these things, right? So it's just fascinating. And when you're looking at life through a clear lens, it's a lot easier to start to get a understanding of the cause and effect that we're all bound to during our life. And no one gets out of here alive. So one of the only decisions and choices that people need to seriously make is, how are you going to live your life? Are you just going to exist and be a spectator? Or are you going to get out there and have some adventures? Like Allan C. Weisbecker, who has been my guest today. You have been witnessing none of the Allan Weisbecker effect. That's in his film Water Time. And you can pick up some of his tasty books like Cosmic Banditos and Can't You Get Along with Anyone, as well as this little autographed copy of In Search of Captain Zero. Get the audio book, listen to it, besides Peace Revolution. So this has been a special segment that Allan and I did while Lisa went to the store. But now we have to go get some food, so
we'll get some hot dogs and then we'll make a barbecue.
And then we'll make some more.
Yeah, cool. That was good, boy. That was really good. What do you want me to? Do you want me to tell people about this?
Yeah, you can tell people about it, because as long as they hear from you, only cool people are hearing it.
Not necessarily.
Well, if there's
not necessarily at all. I'm being,
I don't hide it. It's out there in public. Like I said, it's the most popular, or one of the most popular brains on webbrain.com, and they serve all sorts of people, corporate, whatever. And
so I'm not going to.
So it's out there. I just don't, advertise.
No, because
not because I don't want people to know about it. I want you to know about it. I just want you to find out about it. Down low.
People should find out about it in a certain way.
Yeah.
And if they go from my thing,
just like they learn about Captain Zero.
There's only a certain percentage of people that subscribe to my blog, but there's really some good people, and they'll understand about this.
I think they will too, man.
They will.
I'm excited about my audience learning about you, and I'm excited about your audience learning about what we've got going on, because
they're going to learn.
Everyone here is a lot of old conspiracy theory stories. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is the valid, actual, and factual. This exists, and the connections are up for interpretation. But all of these things exist.
Yeah.
And I kind of dare you not to find connections between looking into any of this stuff.
Right. No, that's the whole point.
It's there.
That's the point that has to be made. Is the connections could mean this or they could mean that. There's a spectrum.
And I'm not trying to trick
might
you.
Even be,
it's not like Robert Anton Wilson where I'm trying to like, ooh, now you don't know what exists. Here's,
who's Robert
right?
Anton Wilson?
Oh, you don't know him? He's an author. He wrote the Illuminatus trilogy and some other books like that.
I actually have one.
So they're
of his books.
interesting.
I haven't read it yet.
They're interesting to read, but I'm like looking for the hard. Where's the knowledge? Where's the reference? How can I check it? Is there a secondary,
That's the way
third?
I am. And on a different, sort of a different level, but not really. I want to get on this.
I think it's human interest to acquire all knowledge in this game so we can play it as best as possible.
It goes back to cause and effect. That's why the global warming thing, I wanted to tell Lisa, it's bullshit.
Well,
I can prove it.
We can have that talk tonight then.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I did it by being a surfer. I'll tell you very simply, they keep saying that the water level's rising. So I went to NOAA's numbers. They give worldwide sea level for the last 100 years all over the world.
Yeah.
Like in fact, 200 different locations, what the sea level's been doing for the last 100 years. That would define global warming.
If the major threat is rising sea levels, yes.
Yes, because that's what they say. The ice caps are melting. The ice is melting everywhere. Problem is the sea level.
It's selective information that they're presenting to people. When you look into the history of Al Gore's family, they've always gotten their money from Occidental Petroleum and been close to the communists and the Soviets. And so there is more at play. That's the inconvenient truth.
It's not just Al Gore, though.
I know.
It's going way beyond Al Gore.
This is Al Gore Sr. This isn't the one that made the movie. This is his dad. I'm showing that there's a multi-generational history of his family taking on actions like the good vice president did,
Right.
He didn't make too much noise when Bush got that election. You know what I'm saying?
You're right. Well,
right. So it was a script. It's a script. They're playing tennis. Learn the players.
The second time.
Learn where they come from.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So we're about to close it down, and Lisa's here, and we're gonna go get a little dinner someplace, hang out with friends, and she's making sure the cameras are still on. So I think we've had a great little extra session here, and I look forward to the rest of the time hanging out.
Cool.